A sinking car, a brave boy dives into icy waters to save a stranger the next day. A sleek black car pulls up to his modest home, revealing a secret that changes everything. What did this incredible act of courage uncover, and how does a small town hero handle a life-altering twist? Stay tuned to uncover the truth behind this powerful tale of bravery, redemption, and unexpected rewards. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that will warm your heart and keep you on the edge of your seat. The late spring storm swept through Redwood Hollow like an angry tide, bending the trees along Evergreen Lake under its weight. The steady patter of rain on rooftops had turned into a torrential downpour, and the small town, normally peaceful, felt swallowed by nature's fury. Wyatt Harper pulled his hood tighter against the rain, clutching the bundle of newspapers under one arm as he pedaled through the slick streets. Delivering newspapers wasn't glamorous, but for Wyatt, it was a way to help his mom. Rachel Harper had been working overtime at the diner, and every bit Wyatt earned helped. He gritted his teeth as a gust of wind nearly toppled him off his bike. Just one more street, he muttered, his voice lost in the storm as he turned onto the gravel road leading past Evergreen Lake. The unmistakable sound of screeching tires pierced through the rain. Wyatt froze. Ahead, through the curtain of rain, he saw an old sedan skidding across the wet road. It swerved violently, hit a fallen branch, and kinned off the embankment straight into the lake. Time seemed to slow. Wyatt's heart pounded as he dropped his bike and sprinted toward the edge of the water. The car's headlights flickered beneath the surface, the front half already submerged. Inside, the silhouette of a man, an elderly man, moved frantically. Wyatt knew he couldn't waste time, but the reality of the situation hit him hard. He couldn't do this alone. His eyes darted around, and then he spotted Eli Bishop, his best friend, just a short distance away. Eli was sitting on the dock, a fishing rod in hand, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding behind him. Eli, Wyatt shouted, his voice hoarse against the wind. Eli, get over here now. Eli looked up, startled, before dropping his rod and sprinting toward Wyatt. What's going on? He yelled, sliding to a stop as he saw the car sinking into the lake. There's someone in there, Wyatt said, already kicking off his sneakers. We've got to get him out. Are you crazy? Eli's voice cracked with panic, but he didn't hesitate. He ran to a nearby tree and broke off a long branch, dragging it toward the water's edge. Take this, shouted, extending the branch. Wyatt wade into the water, the cold biting through his clothes as he pushed toward the sinking car. Each step felt heavier, the muddy lake bed sucking at his feet. The wind whipped around him, and Rob blurred his vision. You don't have to do it alone, his father's voice echoed in his memory, calm and steady like it had been during their long talks by the lake. Lean on others when you need to. Wyatt grabbed the branch Eli held out, using it to steady himself as the water deepened. The car was almost fully submerged now, the man inside pounding weakly on the window. Wyatt reached the vehicle, the water now up to his chest, and peered inside. The man, Sam Whittaker, was dazed, his movements sluggish. I'm going to get you out, Wyatt shouted, though he wasn't sure Sam could hear him. He pulled at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. His lungs burned as he took a deep breath and plunged underwater. The icy cold shocked his system, but he forced himself to focus, feeling along the door frame. The handle resisted, but Wyatt yanked with all his strength. Just as he thought he'd have to surface for air, the door creaked open, and Sam's body tilted toward the opening. Wyatt grabbed him under the arms and kicked hard toward the surface. Eli, Wyatt gasped as they broke through the water. Help me pull him. Eli extended the branch further, and Wyatt looped Sam's arm over it. Together, they dragged the older man toward the shore. By the time they reached the muddy bank, Wyatt was trembling from the cold and exhaustion. Sam lay on his back, coughing weakly, his eyes fluttering open. You're okay, sir, Wyatt said, his breath hitching as he leaned over the man. We got you out. Eli knelt beside them, panting. You scared me half to death, man, but we did it. We actually did it. Wyatt looked at Eli, his chest heaving. For a moment, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had done something good, something that mattered. Far off, the sound of sirens pierced the rain. Someone must have called for help. Wyatt stood shakily looking down at Sam, whose lips moved in a faint whisper Wyatt couldn't make out. "Hang in there," Wyatt murmured, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. As the sirens grew louder, Wyatt glanced at Eli and nodded. They'd done all they could now. It was up to someone else. The wail of sirens cut through the storm as paramedics and a local sheriff's deputy arrived at the muddy bank of Evergreen Lake. Wyatt and Eli stood shivering beside Sam, who was wrapped in Wyatt's jacket and leaning weakly against a tree trunk. Rain still fell in sheets, plastering their clothes to their skin, but neither boy seemed to notice. They exchanged a glance, relief mixed with disbelief at what they had just pulled off. Sam Whittaker coughed again, his face pale but his eyes sharp as he looked at the boys. "You saved me." His voice was faint, barely audible over the rain. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sir," Wyatt replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "We couldn't just let you drown." As the paramedics moved in to assess Sam, a familiar voice broke through the scene. "What on earth is going on here?" Wyatt groaned inwardly as Iron Hensley, the town's nosiest neighbor, emerged from the growing crowd of onlookers. Her oversized raincoat and wide-brimmed hat did little to hide her curious expression as she pushed her way toward the paramedics. In her hand she held a smartphone camera already rolling. "Well, would you look at that," she exclaimed, pointing her phone at Wyatt and Eli. "Our little paper boy and his buddy, heroes of the day." "Iron," Wyatt began, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Don't you iron me, Wyatt harbored," she said, her tone a mix of admiration and mischief. "You boys just saved a man's life. People need to hear about this." Wyatt shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Eli, who was beaming under the unexpected attention. "It's not a big deal," Wyatt muttered. "We just did what anyone would have done." "Not anyone would have jumped into that lake," Ian countered, "still recording, especially not in this weather. You boys are heroes, and I've got it all on video." Wyatt sighed, but Eli clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, man," Eli said, grinning. "She's not wrong. We did something pretty awesome." As the paramedic loaded Sam onto a stretcher, he reached out, grabbing Wyatt's wrist with surprising strength. "Thank you," he said, again, his voice more resolute this time. "You too. You saved me." Wyatt nodded, unsure how to respond. He and Eli watched as the ambulance pulled away, its red lights disappearing into the storm. The crowd began to disperse, and Iron finally lowered her phone, though the satisfied smirk on her face told Wyatt she wasn't done with the story just yet. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving Redwood Hollow bathed in pale sunlight. Wyatt sat at the kitchen table, sipping a mug of cocoa his mother had made for him. His clothes were still damp from the night before, and his muscles ached in ways he hadn't expected. Across from him, Rachel Harper studied him with a mixture of pride and concern. "You scared me half to death, Wyatt," she said, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "Jumping into that lake, what if something had happened to you?" "I had to, Mom," Wyatt replied quietly. "He would have drowned if we didn't act." Rachel's expression softened. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm proud of you for it, but next time promise me you'll be more careful." Wyatt nodded, though he wasn't sure how he could promise something like that. The memory of Sam's car sinking into the lake was still fresh in his mind, a vivid reminder of how quickly life could change. A sharp knock at the door pulled them both from their thoughts. Wyatt's heart sank as he heard Eli's familiar voice shouting, "Wyatt, open up." "Your famous groaning." Wyatt pushed himself up from the table and opened the door. Eli stood on the porch, holding his phone aloft like a trophy. "Irene posted the video," he said, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's everywhere, man. Everyone in town is talking about us." "What do you mean, everywhere?" Wyatt asked, frowning. Eli handed him the phone, and Wyatt's stomach flipped as he saw the video, a shaky but clear recording of the rescue, complete with Irene's enthusiastic commentary. The caption read, "Local heroes save man from sinking car." The view count was already in the hundreds, and the comments ranged from praise to curiosity. "I didn't ask for this," Wyatt muttered, handing the phone back to Eli. "Why did she have to post it?" "Why not?" Eli countered. "We did something that mattered." "Wyatt, don't downplay it." Wyatt didn't respond. Instead, he stepped outside, leaning against the porch railing as the morning breeze rustled the leaves. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. Sure, they'd saved a man's life, but the rescue had been messy, chaotic, If Eli hadn't been there, Wyatt wasn't sure he could have done it. Alone people are going to expect things now, Wyatt said finally, glancing at Eli. What if they think we're something we're not? Eli shrugged. Let them think what they want. We know the truth. And so does Sam. Wyatt wasn't convinced, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stared out at the horizon, wondering what the coming days would bring. Somehow he had a feeling life in Redwood Hollow was about to get a lot more complicated. The morning sun cut through the dissipating mist, casting a golden glow over Redwood Hollow. Wyatt Harper sat on the front porch idly, tossing a small stone between his hands. His mind replayed the events of the storm, the sinking car, the freezing water, and the man they'd saved, Sam Whittaker's faint thank you echoed in his ears, but it didn't drown out the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. Eli had gone home. After their conversation about the video, leaving Wyatt to grapple with the aftermath alone, the town's chatter about the rescue had only amplified overnight, and Wyatt wasn't sure if he was ready to face the attention waiting for him. Rachel Harper's voice broke his thoughts. Wyatt, can you come inside? Breakfast is ready. Before he could respond, the rumble of an unfamiliar engine filled the air. Wyatt froze, his eyes snapping to the narrow dirt road that led to their house. A sleek black car turned the corner and rolled into their driveway, its polished surface gleaming in the morning light. Who on earth? Rachel's voice trailed off as she stepped outside, her apron still tied around her waist. The car came to a stop, and the driver's side door opened. A woman in her late 30s stepped out, her sharp features softened by a warm smile. She was dressed in a tailored blazer and carried an air of confidence that seemed out of place in the modest surroundings of Redwood Hollow. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and professional. Her eyes flicked between Wyatt and Rachel. I'm looking for Wyatt Harper. Wyatt felt his stomach tighten. That's me, he said cautiously, stepping closer. The woman extended her hand. Anna Whittaker, I believe you and your friends saved my father's life. Wyatt blinked, taken aback. Your father, Sam? Anna nodded, her smile faltering slightly. Yes, I haven't seen him in years, but when I saw the video of the rescue online, I knew I had to come here. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. Rachel stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. You're Sam's daughter? She asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I am, Anna replied, her expression turning serious. Though I haven't called Redwood Hollow home in a long time. The weight in her voice hinted at something unspoken, but before Wyatt could dwell on it, Anna turned her attention back to him. What you and your friend did, risking your lives to save my father, it was extraordinary. You didn't just save him, you gave me a second chance to reconnect with him, and I can't thank you enough for that. Wyatt felt a flush of embarrassment rise to his cheeks. It wasn't just me, he mumbled. Eli helped too. Even so, Anna said firmly, what you did matters, and I want to show my gratitude. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, handing it to Rachel. This is a proposal. I'd like to cover any medical expenses you might have and offer a scholarship to attend a private academy in Charleston. It's one of the best schools in the state. He deserves this opportunity. Rachel's eyes widened as she opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. This is incredibly generous, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But why go so far? You don't even know us. Anna hesitated, her confident demeanor faltering for the first time. You're right, she admitted. I don't know you, but I know my father, and I know how much he values loyalty and courage. What you did, it reflects the kind of person that he used to be before everything changed. What do you mean? Wyatt asked, his curiosity piqued. Anna sighed, glancing toward the horizon, as if searching for the right words. My father and we've been estranged for years. There was an accident, a drowning. My brother Michael, after he died, my father shut everyone out. He left Redwood Hollow, and I stayed away too. We haven't spoken in over a decade. Wyatt exchanged a glance with Rachel, the pieces of Sam's guarded demeanor falling into place. So why come back now? He asked. Because you reminded him and me that it's not too late to fix things, Anna said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that second chances don't come around often. Wyatt felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at Rachel, who gave him a reassuring "Smile, you've done something extraordinary, Wyatt," she said softly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "I don't know," Wyatt said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a kid. I don't deserve all this attention." Anna stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect to make a difference. What you did was enough and more." The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the moment Eli appeared at the edge of the driveway, his fishing pole slung over one shoulder. He paused when he saw the black car, his eyes widening. "What did I miss?" he called out. Wyatt chuckled despite himself. "A lot," he replied, his voice lighter than it had been all morning. As Anna prepared to leave, she handed Wyatt a business card. "If you change your mind about the scholarship, or if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Wyatt stared at the card, the weight of her offer sinking in. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time he felt like it might be okay to hope for something better. As the black car disappeared down the road, Wyatt turned to Rachel and Eli. "This is going to take some getting used to." Eli grinned. "Guess we better get started, huh?" Wyatt nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. For now that was enough. The gravel path to Sam Whittaker's cabin wound through dense Appalachian woods, the morning sun breaking through the canopy in golden streaks. Wyatt and Eli walked side by side, the crunch of gravel underfoot punctuating their quiet conversation. "You sure he's okay with us just showing up?" Eli asked, glancing at Wyatt. "I mean, the guy been through a lot. He invited us." Wyatt replied, gripping the strap of his backpack. "Said he wanted to talk. Besides, I've got questions about him, about Anna, and everything." Eli smirked, kicking a loose rock ahead of them. "Well, if this ends up being a weird emotional heart-to-heart, I'm going to need snacks." Wyatt chuckled, but laughter faded as the cabin came into view, perched on the edge of a clearing. The small wooden structure looked sturdy yet worn, its walls darkened with age and weather. An assortment of tools hung neatly on the porch alongside a rocking chair and an old pair of boots. The scent of freshly cut wood lingered in the air. Sam was already waiting for them, seated on the porch with a steaming mug in his hands. He looked up as they approached, his face lighting with a faint smile. "Didn't think you boys would actually take me up on the offer," he said, standing slowly. "Figured we should check on you." Wyatt said. "You doing okay?" Sam nodded, his movements deliberate as he gestured for them to sit. "Better than I've been in a long time. Come on in, I want to show you something." The cabin's interior was a reflection of its owner, simple, functional, and steeped in history. The walls were lined with shelves holding hand-carved figurines, clocks, and small tools. A workbench dominated one corner, its surface cluttered with gears, springs, and half-finished timepieces. Wyatt's gaze landed on a collection of pocket watches, each one unique. "This is incredible," Wyatt murmured, running a finger along the edge of a polished wooden clock. "You made all of these?" Sam smiled, his expression tinged with pride. "Every single one. Spent most of my life working with my hands, wood, metal, you name it. There's something about taking broken things and making them whole again." Wyatt exchanged a glance with Eli, who was inspecting a model ship on one of the shelves. "That's pretty deep," Eli said, grinning. "You should put that on a mug or something." Sam chuckled, but the sound quickly faded. He reached for a small wooden box on the table, opening it with care. Inside was a pocket watch, its silver surface gleaming softly in the cabin's warm light. He held it out to Wyatt. "This," Sam began, his voice quiet, "belonged to my son." Wyatt hesitated before taking the watch. Its weight surprising in his palm, the engraved words on the back caught his eye. "My son Michael," Sam continued, sinking into a chair. "He was about your age when we lost him." Wyatt felt the air grow heavy. "What happened?" Sam took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It was a summer day, not so different from the ones you've probably spent at Evergreen Lake. Michael was swimming with some friends. I was supposed to meet him there, but I got held up. Thought it wouldn't matter. By the time I arrived, he was gone, pulled under by the currents." The room fell silent, save for the faint ticking of a nearby clock. Eli shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Wyatt, who looked down at the watch in his hands. "I blamed myself," Sam said, his voice horror. "Anna did too, in her own way. She was just a kid, but losing her brother, it changed her. It changed all of us. I couldn't face it, so I left. I thought maybe distance would make it easier, but it doesn't. Not really." Wyatt swallowed hard, the weight of Sam's story settling on his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "That must have been unforgivable." Sam finished His eyes meeting Wyatt's, at least that's what I've told myself all these years. But seeing you and Eli, seeing what you did for me, it's made me think maybe it's not too late to fix things. Eli cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Well, no pressure or anything, but I think you're off to a good start. Saving the old guy kind of balances the scales, right? Sam barked, a short laugh, the sound startling in its genuineness. Maybe you're right, kid, he said, shaking his head. Maybe. He leaned forward, nodding toward the pocket watch in Wyatt's hand. I want you to have that. Wyatt's eyes widened. I can't take this. It was your son's. Sam smiled faintly. Michael would have liked you, and besides, it's been sitting in that box long enough. I think it's time it meant something again. Wyatt hesitated, but finally nodded, tucking the watch carefully into his pocket. Thank you, he said. I'll take good care of it. As the boys prepared to leave, Sam walked them to the door. You two remind me of something I used to believe, he said, his voice steady. That it's never too late to start over. Eli grinned, slinging an arm around Wyatt's shoulders as they stepped outside. Guess we're part of history now, huh? Wyatt chuckled, glancing back at Sam's cabin as they walked away. The weight of the pocket watch pressed lightly against his side, a reminder of the story they'd just heard and the stories yet to come. The air in Redwood Hold seemed to shift in the days following Sam Whitaker's heart-wrenching story. Wyatt Harper carried the pocket watch in his jacket pocket everywhere he went, feeling its weight as both a connection to Sam and a reminder of the responsibility that had unexpectedly landed on his shoulders. He tried to settle into normally, but the whispers around town were impossible to ignore. Wyatt leaned against the counter at the diner where his mom worked, waiting for her shift to end. Eli was beside him, flipping through a newspaper with exaggerated boredom. Anything good in there, Wyatt asked, his voice low. Eli smirked, tapping a column on the front page. Would you look at that? We're still the talk of the town. The headline read, Young Heroes Save Local Man. But was it all for fame? Wyatt felt his stomach twist. He snatched the paper and scanned the article, which included quotes from Irene Hensley. Her words were sharp and accusing. It's all just too convenient, don't you think, boys? Their age pulling off a stunt like that makes you wonder if they weren't hoping for all this attention. Wyatt clenched the paper, his jaw tightening. She just can't leave it alone. Can she let it go? Eli said, shrugging. People like Irene, they need to feel important. Doesn't mean she's right. Before Wyatt could respond, the bell above the diner door jingled. A tall man in a crisp suit strode in, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He carried a briefcase and wore an expression that screamed self-importance. Wyatt recognized him immediately from photos Sam had shown them. That's Paul Whitaker, Wyatt whispered to Eli. Paul approached the counter, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Wyatt and Eli. You must be the boys who saved my cousin, he said, his tone smooth but cold. Wyatt nodded cautiously. Yeah, that's us. Can we help you? Paul smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think it's the other way around. You see, I've come to ensure Sam gets the help he needs. It's clear he's not capable of managing his affairs anymore. Wyatt bristled. What do you mean by that? Paul set his briefcase on the counter and opened it, revealing a stack of documents. My cousin has been through a lot, and I don't believe he's in a position to make sound decisions about his property. As his nearest living relative, I have a responsibility to step in. Eli scoffed. You mean take over? Paul ignored him, directing his attention back to Wyatt. I'm sure you boys mean well, but you're out of your depth here. Leave this to the adults. Before Wyatt could respond, Rachel appeared, her face set with determination. If you're here to talk about Sam, you should take it up with him, she said firmly. These boys have done more for him than anyone else in years. Paul's smile faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. Of course, I'll speak with Sam directly. With that, he closed his briefcase and left the diner, his polished demeanor leaving a sour taste in the air. Later that day, Wyatt and Eli made their way to Sam's cabin. The encounter with Paul still fresh in their minds, they found Sam at his workbench, standing a piece of walnut with slow, deliberate movements. You've got company, Wyatt said. Stepping inside, Sam looked up, his face softening as he saw the boys. That's so your cousin Eli, added Paul. He showed up at the diner talking about how you're not fit to manage your property. Sam's hands paused and a shadow passed Over his face, I figured it was only a matter of time. What's his deal, Wyatt asked. Why does he care so much? Sam, setting the wood aside. Paul's always had a nose for opportunity. My cabin, my land. It's not much, but to him it's a prize worth fighting for. He sees me as an old man who's outlived his usefulness. That's not true, Wyatt said firmly. Sam smiled faintly. Thank you, son, but this town loves its gossip, and Paul knows how to stir the pot. The air in Redwood Hollow seemed to shift in the days following Sam Whittaker's heart-wrenching story. Wyatt Harper carried the pocket watch in his jacket pocket everywhere he went, feeling its weight as both a connection to Sam and a reminder of the responsibility that had unexpectedly landed on his shoulders. He tried to settle into normally, but the whispers around town were impossible to ignore. Wyatt leaned against the counter at the diner where his mom worked, waiting for her shift to end. Eli was beside him, flipping through a newspaper with exaggerated boredom. Anything good in there, Wyatt asked, his voice low. Eli smirked, tapping a column on the front page. Would you look at that? We're still the talk of the town. The headline read, Young Heroes Save Local Men. But was it all for fame? Wyatt felt his stomach twist. He snatched the paper and scanned the article, which included quotes from Irene Hensley. Her words were sharp and accusing. It's all just too convenient, don't you think, boys? Their age pulling off a stunt like that makes you wonder if they weren't hoping for all this attention. Wyatt clenched the paper, his jaw tightening. She just can't leave it alone. Can she let it go? Eli said, shrugging. People like Irene, they need to feel important. Doesn't mean she's right. Before Wyatt could respond, the bell above the diner door jingled. A tall man in a crisp suit strode in, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He carried a briefcase and wore an expression that screamed self-importance. Wyatt recognized him immediately from photos Sam had shown them. That's Paul Whittaker, Wyatt whispered to Eli. Paul approached the counter, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Wyatt and Eli. You must be the boys who saved my cousin, he said, his tone smooth but cold. Wyatt nodded cautiously. Yeah, that's us. Can we help you? Paul smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think it's the other way around. You see, I've come to ensure Sam gets the help he needs. It's clear he's not capable of managing his affairs anymore. Wyatt bristled. What do you mean by that? Paul set his briefcase on the counter and opened it, revealing a stack of documents. My cousin has been through a lot, and I don't believe he's in a position to make sound decisions about his property. As his nearest living relative, I have a responsibility to step in. Eli scoffed. You mean take over? Paul ignored him, directing his attention back to Wyatt. I'm sure you boys mean well, but you're out of your depth here. Leave this to the adults. Before Wyatt could respond, Rachel appeared, her face set with determination. If you're here to talk about Sam, you should take it up with him, she said firmly. These boys have done more for him than anyone else in years. Paul's smile faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. Of course, I'll speak with Sam directly. With that, he closed his briefcase and left the diner, his polished demeanor leaving a sour taste in the air. Later that day, Wyatt and Eli made their way to Sam's cabin, the encounter with Paul still fresh in their minds. They found Sam at his workbench, sanding a piece of walnut with slow, deliberate movements. You've got company, Wyatt said, stepping inside. Sam looked up, his face softening as he saw the boys. That's so your cousin, Eli added Paul. He showed up at the diner talking about how you're not fit to manage your property. Sam's hands paused and a shadow passed over his face. I figured it was only a matter of time. What's his deal? Wyatt asked. Why does he care so much? Sam sighed, setting the wood aside. Paul's always had a nose for opportunity. My cabin, my land. It's not much, but to him it's a prize worth fighting for. He sees me as an old man who's outlived his usefulness. That's not true, Wyatt said firmly. Sam smiled faintly. Thank you, son, but this town loves its gossip, and Paul knows how to stir the pot. The crisp autumn air settled over Redwood Hollow, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the faint smokiness of wood-burning stoves. For Wyatt Harper, the changing season brought no relief to the worries that seemed to pile higher with each passing day. The whispers about him and Eli were still present, though quieter now, like a low hum he couldn't shake. But there were bigger concerns brewing, one far closer to home. It started on a quiet Thursday afternoon, Wyatt was at school, half listening to a history lecture, when his teacher, Mrs. Green, stepped out and returned moments later with a grave expression. She called softly, motioning him over. There's been an accident. Your mom's okay, but she's at the clinic. They've asked you to come. The words hit Wyatt like a punch. His heart raced as he grabbed his bag and bolted out of the classroom, ignoring the murmurs from his classmates. By the time he reached the small-town clinic, his chest burned from running, and his thoughts were a chaotic swirl. Rachel Harper was sitting on the edge of an examination table, her left arm in a sling. Her face brightened when she saw Wyatt, but the exhaustion behind her eyes was unmistakable. Mom, Wyatt breathed, rushing to her side. What happened? Rachel smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. Just a slip at the diner, sweetheart, nothing too serious. A nurse nearby cleared her throat. Mrs. Harper has a sprained wrist and a mild concussion. She'll need rest and time off work. Wyatt's stomach sank. Time off, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. It's fine. Wyatt will manage. But as they left the clinic, walking slowly toward their small house, Wyatt couldn't ignore the tightness in her voice or the way she winced with every step. The next morning, Wyatt woke before dawn, his mind already racing with calculations, rent, groceries, utilities. His part-time newspaper route wasn't nearly enough to cover the gap left by Rachel's lost wages. He threw on his jacket and headed out into the chilly morning, the sound of his bike tires crunching on the gravel road the only company for his thoughts. After finishing his deliveries, Wyatt stopped by Sam Whitaker's cabin, hoping for advice, or maybe just a distraction. He found Sam in the workshop, carefully sanding a rocking chair. You're out early, Sam said without looking up. Wyatt hesitated, then stepped inside. Mom's out of work for a while, he said bluntly. I need to make more money. Sam sat down the sandpaper and gestured for Wyatt to sit. You're a good son, he said, his voice steady, but you're not in this alone. I don't want charity, Wyatt replied quickly. Sam chuckled, shaking his head. It's not charity. If it's earned, I've got plenty of projects that could use an extra set of hands. How about it? Wyatt nodded, relief washing over him. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Over the next week, Wyatt threw himself into every job he could find in addition to working with Sammy. Mowed lawns, cleaned gutters, and even helped Eli's dad repaint their barn. Eli, true to form, jumped in wherever he could, taking on small repair jobs around town and splitting the pay with Wyatt. Balancing work and school proved to be a challenge. Wyatt's evenings were spent sanding wood or hauling replies, leaving little time for homework. By the end of each day, he was so exhausted that he barely had the energy to eat before collapsing into bed. Still, he refused to complain. At Sam's workshop, Wyatt found a strange sense of peace. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper and the scent of freshly cut wood gave him something to focus on besides his mounting responsibilities. Sam was a patient teacher, offering guidance with a mix of wisdom and dry humor. Patience, Wyatt, Sam said one afternoon as Wyatt struggled to smooth a rough edge on a chair leg. You can't rush quality, Wyatt exhaled, slowly adjusting his grip on the sandpaper. I just feel like I'm running out of time. Sam leaned back in his chair, studying the boy. You've got more time than you think, he said. And you've got people willing to help if you let them. Wyatt glanced at him, his expression wary. I don't want to be a burden sometimes, Sam said, his voice soft but firm. The strongest thing you can do is accept help. That's not weakness, son. That's courage. The strain on Rachel was harder to hide as the days wore on. She, tougher than we look. As word of Rachel's injury spread, the community began to step in. Some neighbors brought over meals, while others offered small jobs to help Wyatt and Eli stay afloat. Even Irene Hensley, whose sharp tongue rarely spared anyone, left a basket of fresh vegetables on their porch one morning without saying a word. Despite the challenges, Wyatt found strength in the people around him. Each day felt like a balancing act, but he kept moving forward, driven by the quiet determination that had always defined him. By the end of the week, as Wyatt left Sam's cabin after another long day of work, he looked back at the old man standing in the doorway. Thanks for everything, Sam, Wyatt said, his voice sincere. Sam smiled, his hands resting on the doorframe. You're doing fine, Wyatt. Just remember, you don't Have to do it all alone, Wyatt nodded, slipping the pocket watch out of his jacket and holding it tightly. The engraved words seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. Time heals what courage cannot. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a promise. The days in Redwood Hollow grew shorter, the crisp autumn air hinting at the winter to come. Wyatt Harper worked steadily in Sam Whittaker's workshop, his hands gliding over a piece of sanded wood. The rhythmic scraping of sandpaper had become a meditative routine, grounding him amidst the turmoil his family faced. Eli was nearby, organizing tools while cracking jokes to lighten the mood for a moment. Everything felt steady, almost normal, but Redwood Hollow had a way of twisting peace into chaos. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning. Wyatt was delivering newspapers when Eli sprinted toward him, waving his phone. Wyatt, Eli called, his voice breathless. You're not going to believe this. Wyatt slowed his bike, frowning. What now? Eli thrust his phone forward, the screen displaying a post on the town's community board. It was from Paul Whittaker, accusing Wyatt and Eli of breaking into Sam's workshop and stealing several valuable tools. The post included pictures of an open drawer, tools scattered on the floor, and Sam's workshop in disarray. Wyatt's heart sank. What is this? He stammered, his voice tinged with disbelief. It's a setup, Eli said firmly. Paul must have done this. He's trying to frame us. Wyatt felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Why? What does he even get out of this? Leverage, Eli replied. If the town thinks you're a thief, it makes his claim against Sam stronger. He's playing dirty. By midday, the whispers had started as Wyatt passed by the diner. Familiar faces glanced his way with sus eye. Iron Hensley stood on the porch, her arms crossed and lips pursed. Shame, really, she said to no one in particular, though her voice carried loud enough for Wyatt to hear. Thought those boys were better than that. Wyatt clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he pushed past. Each step felt heavier, the weight of judgment pressing down on him. When he arrived at Sam's cabin, he found the old man sitting on the porch, staring at a wrench in his hands. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Sam, Wyatt began, his voice tentative. You don't believe this, do you? Sam's gaze lifted slowly, his expression unreadable. I don't want to believe it, he said after a long pause. But the workshop was a mess. Wyatt, tools missing, and Paul. He's got people talking. Wyatt's chest tightened. You know us, Sam, you know we'd never do something like that. I thought I did, Sam replied, his tone heavy. But this town has seen good boys go bad before. I need time to think. The words stung more than Wyatt expected. He stepped back, shaking his head. You're wrong about us, he said quietly, and I'm going to prove it. Eli found Wyatt later that evening, sitting on the porch of his house, staring at the pocket watch in his hands. The engraved words seemed to mock him. Time heals what courage cannot. Hey, Eli said, dropping onto the step beside him. Don't let him get to you, Wyatt sighed, running a hand through his hair. Why does it feel like doing the right thing always comes with a price? Because it does, Eli replied with a wry grin. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. Wyatt turned the watch over in his hands. The whole town thinks we're criminals. Even Sam doesn't believe us. How do we fix that? Eli's grin widened. Easy. We don't just fix it, we prove it. The next morning, the boys set out to clear their names. Eli, armed with his phone and an endless supply of determination, suggested they start with the community board where Paul had made his accusation. They posted a statement denying the allegations and requesting a town meeting to set the record straight. We need to find proof, Wyatt said as they left the library, something that shows Paul's lying. And we will, Eli said confidently. He's bound to slip up. Guys like him always do. Their first break came when Iron Hensley, of all people, approached them outside the general store. She glanced around, conspirator, before leaning in. I don't like Paul any more than I like trouble, she said, her tone begrudging. But I saw him near Sam's cabin the night before the break-in. Didn't think much of it at the time, but now Wyatt's heart quickened. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Iron huffed. Because it's your word against his, and Paul's got a way of twisting things. But if you boys are serious about proving him wrong, I'll back you up. It wasn't much, but it was a start. At the town meeting that evening, Wyatt and Eli stood before a crowd of skeptical faces. Paul Whittaker lounged in a corner, his smug expression daring them to challenge him. Wyatt's hands trembled as he held the pocket watch in his jacket, its weight a steadying Force, we didn't steal anything, Wyatt began, his voice firm. We've been working with Sam for weeks, learning from him, helping him. Why would we throw that away? Eli stepped forward, holding up his phone. And we've got proof. Paul's been lying. Iron saw him near the cabin that night, and I've got a time-stamped photo showing us miles away when the break-in happened. The crowd murmured, heads turning toward Paul. This confident smirk faltered as Eli pulled up the photo on a projector screen showing the boys painting a barn the evening of the alleged break-in. Paul tried to deflect. It's all a coincidence. Enough. Sank voice cut through the room like a whip. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. I've had enough of your lies, Paul. These boys have done nothing but help me, and I'll be damned if I let you drag their names through the mud. The room fell silent. Paul shrank under the weight of Sam's words, his argument unraveling before him. One by one, the townsfolk turned their backs on him, their murmurs growing louder. Later that night, as Wyatt and Eli walked home, the tension finally began to ease. Wyatt glanced at his friend, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. You were right, he said, about fighting for the truth. Eli grinned, nudging Wyatt's shoulder. Told you now. How about we celebrate with some snacks? Hero work.